Please give a warm welcome to our next guest, Yogi Roth. Yogi, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are very excited to hear more about your book, and I wasn't able to get my hands on it before I found out when you were coming on, so I'm excited to read it after the fact. But I did kind of get a little bit of a glimpse, a little section from it that says this. I want to read this quote. It says, "Some found great success on the field, some didn't. Yet all share one core experience: the football world told them what their life path was destined to be." This, of course, in reference to what happens when we label a guy a five-star quarterback and just how that changes their lives. Well, we just did that last week when we did our five-star reveal. So first and foremost, I mean, we're the ones that are just kind of labeling it and walking away and seeing what happens with their career. What kind of pressure is on these guys when they get labeled a five-star QB?
Well, you probably know that. It's a lot, right? It's the same thing for all of us in our industry. You put yourself out on a TV show or on social media and people can automatically judge you. I think the first thing is, like, I got a ton of empathy for everybody over at 24/7. I've known guys like Brandon Huffman and Greg Biggins and so many of you for so many years. It's a tough job. But what had happened is I've been working for Elite 11 for almost 20 years now. And about 3 or 4 years ago, myself and the co-author Joey Roberts, it just hit us. Parents and players kept asking the same question. They're trying to navigate the space of recruiting. And like you were just talking about with those stories, there's so many stories I'm sure that you all have told or been asked around, how do I figure this thing out? And what we netted out was there's no way to Google how to be a five-star recruit or a walk-on recruit or the parent of a five-star recruit or the parent of a walk-on. We said, well, we got to throw down and put something together. So we created that book. And within it, we wanted to give kind of a book of wisdom, guideposts, and lessons in which different parents and players can look at and say, I want to learn from this. And that's what we did. We interviewed over 130 quarterbacks. So it's not just mine and Joey's advice in the book. We wanted to hear from them and what they went through. And to answer your question, what we learned is that when the label got placed on them, majority of them didn't ask for it. I remember talking to Ryan Perlew, who's one of the all-time greats, and he said, I was sitting on my farm in Louisiana, and all of a sudden I got a call, and they said, you're the greatest quarterback in the country. And my life changed in an instant. And that happened from Ryan Perlew to Sam Heward to Caleb Williams. When guys that have succeeded, some that maybe haven't in the court of public opinion. And I think it's important to take the helmet off of those players. That's why even on the cover, it's their faces, to remind people that, yes, they may go to your school, whether you're at Florida or you're at Alabama or at USC or Washington or Notre Dame, but they're human beings. And I think too often we give them a ranking, we give them a huddle highlight film, we give them an evaluation, and we forget that they're still developing, regardless of NIL, they're still developing in a mental rate of 16, 17, 18 years old. And it's hard to manage all that. And I've been able to learn that over the course of my time at Elite 11 and my time as a broadcaster at the Pac-12 networks and even as a player being around elite performers and quarterbacks when I was playing at Pitt. So I just think it's important to note that. And that was a big reason why we wrote the book.
And I love when we talk to our recruiting analysts and they do give you that little piece of who they are as a human. I think of Nicholas Harbor, and he has dreams and aspirations of not just running in the Olympics, but also of, being a surgeon and being a doctor one day. And so you get to kind of peel the layers back and learn more about some of these athletes. This year in particular, we have five-star quarterbacks. First time that's happened since 2009. So a lot of guys that we're placing all that pressure and all that excitement on. You mentioned your connection with Elite 11. You got to see a lot of these guys up close and personal. I mean, just what are your overall thoughts about this year's quarterback class?
I think it's impressive. And I think overall, when you look at that roster of players and the graphic that's on the screen there, I think like every year we look at them and we say, oh, all right, they're going to be the next thing. I think when you look at the history of rankings, they would say it's probably not going to happen. Now, who can you predict will thrive? Who will you predict will lose a coach? Who might get injured? I mean, there's so many intangible elements to this thing that end up making how we project this thing at this stage of their careers usually unrealistic when you go to the end of it. And the numbers bear that out. I mean, if you look at these guys, I think they all have a chance to thrive, but I'm always reminded, like, there's 134 five-star quarterbacks in history heading into this year, and how many of them won a Super Bowl? One. And it was Matthew Stafford in year 13 on team 2, and the loose definition of five stars, you guys know, is like a franchise player who can change a franchise. So can any of those five change a franchise? I don't know. Like, we're going to find out, and I'm not going to say, yes, one's going to walk away with 2 Heismans and 3 Natties and a bunch of appearances in the CFP. I just think it's inappropriate, to be honest with you, to put that type of pressure on any of those players. I hope they all crush it, Huge fan of those guys, was around a few of them, of course, at the Elite 11. They have all the talent in the world. But as we all know, like this college football thing, talent isn't the only recipe to success. There's so many other ways that allow it to happen and allow us to find surprise players that sometimes we didn't project to be starters or to be big time players, and they end up becoming that.
Yogi, from your experience at Elite 11, you've obviously seen a lot of guys that have gone on to have success. Not all of those guys 5 stars right in the process, or maybe some guys that surprised you before coming into the Elite 11. When you look at it from a pure intangible standpoint, that week that you have with those players, right? You get to take a look under the hood a little bit. You get to see the camaraderie that they have with other participants there, the level of competition. What are they like on the whiteboard a little bit? With the guys that have succeeded that you see in the NFL or maybe in years past before that, are there some commonalities there that maybe you look for or that you have felt and gained from experience from your time with the Elite 11?
Yeah, man, I love this question and love the work that you do, man. I get to track it and see how you guys evaluate and describe this position specifically. I think the number one thing that I think that we've found at Elite 11, like let's just eliminate elite competitor. Let's eliminate elite passer. Like you have to be able to do a couple of those things to just get into the room and have success in college, let alone the next level. I think it comes down to 2 things. One, are you able to recapture what we call like the wonderment around the game? Like, or has it turned into too much of a business too quickly? I think that is like so vital to these players when they find success. You could just watch Mahomes yesterday. Like he's out there playing like my 7-year-old is playing in the backyard. Do you have the ability, and that's a real tool, can you tap into that? We call it the wonder switch when we meet with guys like Malachi Nelson and other Elite 11 quarterbacks, and we take them through that. And most of the guys have that switch turned off at some point because of recruiting, because they don't live up to expectations, because of a depth chart, because of grades, because of going to college in an unforeseen circumstance, because of a breakup with a girlfriend. Do they have that ability to turn it back on? And I think the great ones do. And I think number 2 is, are you a seeker? We live in a world now with these quarterbacks, and one of my favorite things to do at Elite 11 is to stand beside all the reporters around them and listen to how guys answer questions. And I say that because often they'll try to be very political, say the right thing, do the right thing, and they're put up on this pedestal where they're supposed to have every answer. And the reality is when you walk into a quarterback room and that Shark Tank, with which that is at Elite 11 or even in college and of course in the NFL, you have to be willing to seek. And that's why number 2 is, are you a seeker? Are you willing to ask questions? Are you naturally curious about the craft, about the game? I mean, you could be Joe Montana, day 1 install for his entire career. He took the same copious notes. I'd say the same thing for Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. When we met them at that stage, some of the best note takers, some of the best questions around the craft, on the field, off the field. And I think that is a real skill. And I think now it's harder than ever because they're hearing from people like you, or they're put up on every stage. And now NIL is such a factor in this that when they walk into a facility, I hope that the coaches front load those type of mental skills and mental traits. Say, hey, man, you have to remain curious. If not, you're really going to struggle this craft, especially a quarterback, because it is the most challenging position, I think, in all of sports. And as we all know, the most scrutinized and hyped. So you have to have that ability to find your joy again or your wonderment. And then we think the willingness and the desire and the traits to go seek.
If I'm a parent of one of the top quarterbacks in the country, and I come to you because you've got this wealth of experience and knowledge, and I ask you, what are the characteristics and traits that you saw that separate the guys who made it from the guys who didn't? What does my son need to focus on, and what do you think are the most important things he has to have moving forward?
Yeah, I'd send him to you first, man. I mean, I love the stuff that you do with parents and players. I've been doing it for a really long time at a high level. The first thing, and I have calls with parents all the time about this, and it's really challenging. I have a dramatic amount of empathy for parents in this situation because they're trying to always do what's right, of course, for their son and look in the future. And what often gets forgotten is the immediate and is the absolute present with their son. And that's the first thing I ask them. I say, okay, what's going on right now? How happy is he? What are his grades like? What's his community like? What are his friends like? What's his relationship with his coaches like? Like, is he living in an alternate universe? Like, I get his recruiting is an alternate universe. He might be the only player that's going to a Power 5 school on scholarship. He might be a 5-star player on your ranking system. But what is he like in the present? Where is his mental state? I think now more than anything for parents and for the athlete, and I talk to coaches in the Pac-12 about this all the time, again, are we front-loading mental skills? So let me break that down for you. When you walk into a facility, is the first thing we're talking about X's and O's playbook? Is the second thing we're talking about your NIL deal? Is the third thing we're talking about academics? Is the fourth thing we're talking about social skills and your community outside of the facility? Maybe. But what I hope happens is the first thing that gets front-loaded by these coaches through the parents to the athlete is mental skills. Meaning when you walk in right down the hallway, we've got a room of 5 to 10 licensed professionals for when life does get hard, because it might have been easy up until now. You might have coasted, been the best dude, probably have been the best guy in your area, in your state, maybe in the country at your position. Well, welcome to a totally different planet, and it's going to be a challenge. So we've got some resources for you. So that would easily be the first thing I would tell any parent is check in on the present moment, check how happy your son is, and then make sure you're beginning to front load the mental skills that we all know he will need when he gets to the next level.
You hear that a lot with quarterbacks, as being cerebral and what's going on between the ears. And it's not just processing plays and reading defenses. It's all the other factors that you talked about there, too. You mentioned guys being put on a pedestal. I mean, none is higher than the one if you have the last name of Manning. And, of course, Arch Manning is one of those guys. So we added to that a little bit, too, Yogi, and just calling him not just the #1 quarterback in this class, but the #1 player. All the detractors, I'm sure you've heard the noise. We already have it going in the chat. I mean, before the show even started, as soon as we said that we were going to talk about Arch Manning, it comes up, right? He didn't come to the camps. He has the last name Manning. That's the only reason that we've got him there. I mean, what's your response to some of those critiques when it comes to this guy's play?
Well, that's the world that we're in, right? I mean, you guys are in the middle of recruiting. You're leading recruiting. It's a billion-dollar industry with a B for a reason. There's a lot of attention, a lot of hype. And a lot of chatter. That's just the reality of it. I think for him, clearly he's a talented player, one of the more talented guys in the country. I never got to meet him personally. I wish I did. I wish he got to be around the community of the Elite 11. I think it's the best part of it is the fraternity, to be quite honest with you. I've seen guys, I remember Christian Hackenberg, his year, when he came out to the camp, that was the week that everything went down at Penn State. And he developed a bond with 20 other players that he's still friends with. So that's, I wish I got to be around him, and more importantly, he got to be around Brian Stump and our staff and Trent Dilfer at the time, and of course all the other quarterbacks. But clearly he's talented. What I love about him was where he's going and where he is, which is with Steve Sarkisian at Texas. Sark taught me offensive football for the most part. My first couple of years on the SU staff were with him and Lane Kiffin as the co-offensive coordinators. I spent 4 years there with him. He knows how to manage this position as well as anybody in America. And every quarterback, I really believe, at multiple points in a season, if you're a starter, and definitely throughout your career, you have these moments where you walk into the OC, the head coach, the play caller's room, and you say, man, it's really hard right now. I remember Leinart did it after we beat Notre Dame on the Bush push. I was in the room that moment. Booty had it, Sanchez had it, Barkley had it. Every quarterback I've ever been around as a coach had it, and anyone has ever talked to as an analyst has had it. He'll have it too. So he's in good hands in that. I think when it comes to public perception and the rankings, it's already out of hand. I mean, I love what you guys just did in terms of rating 32 players as 5-star guys, but I don't know if all 32 are going to be first-round picks in the NFL. And now all those guys have to wear it. So hopefully the facility they go into next knows how to manage those expectations, and the player has those tools ready for him to manage those expectations, because none of them ever asked for it. And I think the same thing for Arch Manning. Like, he didn't ask to be the man in terms of every recruiting site since he was a sophomore and the last name and all those things, but that's his reality. And I'm sure he's been offered a lot of tools to manage that instead of just shutting it out, but actually having processes to deal with that and knowing where he's going with Sark. I think he's going to be in great hands, and I'd imagine will flourish when it's his time to flourish. And I think at this position, we often think that everybody can come in and be Trevor Lawrence, and it's hard. It's hard to go do that your first year. So I hope he gets to sit, gets a breather, and then when he plays in that system, can cut it loose and let it rip.